first lesson today starts at Genesis 28, verse 10 through 22. Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you.
Our gospel lesson this day continues at Jesus' parables in Matthew. There in the 13th chapter, we pick up at the 24th verse. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed seeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants grew up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? The master answered, An enemy has done this. And the slave said to him, Then do you want us to go and to gather them? He replied, No, but in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with the good. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. At harvest, I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them into bundles to be burned, but then gather the wheat to place into my barn. He put before them yet another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It's the smallest of all the seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundations of the world. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, So explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. And Jesus answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. The reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. Several years ago, a good friend invited me to come and preach at his church. And it was these same passages that were allotted for that day. Looking for a sermon prop to use, I thought I would go over to the Nightingale hardware store in Marcellus and get a little bit of grass seed. I wasn't sure when I got to where I was going to preach if they would have a hardware or landscaping shop and if seed would be available, so I went in and got some of Nightingale's best. And I said, I don't need to have pounds and pounds of seed. All I need is about a third of a handful. And they said 10 cents. And so I brought that handful home and put it into 2 little baggies, and we got ready to go to the airport. And getting to the airport, went to Homeland Security, and they said, what's in the bag? And I said, well, in this one is 5 cents of grass, and in this one is 5 cents of weeds. At which point the security guard stood up and said, what? And I said, Jesus had this parable about good seed and about weeds. And I wasn't sure if they'd have any, so I brought my own weed along. I decided to abandon that sermon and instead to preach on Genesis and what happened to Jacob. Jacob has this dream about a ladder to heaven. The last several weeks we have followed as Abraham and Sarah gave birth to a child and then determined whether they could still believe in God once they had the fulfillment of that. And then Isaac took a wife. And we read last week about how Rebekah was to give birth to twins. And Lisa, I'm not sure if the boys kicked a great deal in the womb, but that was part of last week's, was the wrestling that the boys did even before birth. Jacob's hard to love. Fact of the matter is, as parents, while we try to love each one equally and do our very best for each one, there are certain things that make one stand out at different times in their lives. Jacob was tough. Jacob was hard to love. There's this story about how brothers sometimes don't like their vegetables and so will get others to eat them for them. Jacob made a vegetable stew, and his brother came in famished and said, in order to have some of the soup, you've got to give me your birthright. And so stole the rights from his elder brother. On their father's deathbed, when he was blind and deaf and unable to tell which one was which, Jacob tricked their father into giving all the blessings to him, leaving nothing but curses for his brother. Time and again, Jacob stole from the family and tricked the family and schemed to get ahead. Till finally, Rebekah, the mother, says, we need to launch this boy. We need to get him a good wife and get him out of here. Not one of those Hittite women like his brother Esau married. Let's go back to our hometown, the town where I came from, and maybe my brother Laban, maybe he knows some good girls that my son could marry. And they send Jacob off. It's a long walk from where they lived in Beersheba to Haran to Ur of Chaldea. And so along the way, Jacob laid down to rest, and he used a rock for a pillow. Not very soft, but it elevated his head a little bit. And in the midst of his sleep, he has a dream. And in the dream are visions that this is what the Irish call one of those thin places where heaven and earth are very close together. So close they almost touch. And in his dream, there's a ladder to heaven. Now, in all probability at that time, they created what were called ziggurats. And a ziggurat was a place of worship. But the determination of how big it was had nothing to do with how big the congregation was, how many people could fit inside. Instead, the determination for a ziggurat was how high up in heaven is your God and how big is your God. The bigger the God, the bigger the ziggurat, and the higher it was to reach the highest God. And he had this dream of angels going up and down on that ladder. There are times I think that Skaneateles Lake is one of those thin places with all of its different emotions, times in which it crashes in, times in which it's calm as glass. Like us, all the different emotions that are hidden there. When Jacob awakes, he realizes he has seen something miraculous. It's changed him. The Hebrew here is that he is overraw, not overwrought, but so raw, so scraped that he feels new, cleansed, and fragile. And so he names this place as being the house of God. In Hebrew, the word for house is Beth, and the name for God is El, so it's called Bethel. But as much as Jacob was changed by the dream, he wasn't completely changed. All throughout his life until this point, he's referred to God as being the God of my ancestors, your God, my father's God, not my God. It's like those who grow up in a church and refer to my mom and dad's church, and those who come to be married and want to be married in their parents' church before their parents' God, not their own, but keeping the tradition in the family. So it is that Jacob decides to make a promise to God. He's always been bartering. He bartered with his brother for the soup, for the birthright. He bartered with his father for the blessing. Now he wants to barter with God to get God to do what he wants him to do. My wife did a beautiful job of reading the passage in a wonderful liturgical voice. But this is more like Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Can't you see Jacob raising his fist to God saying, if God will be with me, if God will give me all the food I need to eat, if God will give me all the water I need, if God will give me the clothes that I need on my back, if God will watch over me and protect me, if God will bring me back to this place, to my Father's house in peace, then this will be my God. And then I'll give 1/10 of all that God has given me to God. It's not a pledge of loyalty. It's an if-then. If God will do my bidding, then I will be faithful. "40 years ago, when I was in high school, there was a song published by Led Zeppelin. It was done by Plain and Pitter, called Stairway to Heaven. You folks have all stayed here. Talking about grass and talking about Stairway to Heaven, I figured somebody would get up and leave. Stairway to Heaven is one of the most famous rock and roll songs of all history. In the history of rock and roll, it ranks number 3. At our homecoming, the theme was Stairway to Heaven. It was still at the top of the charts when we got to prom, so it became the theme of prom. It is the most remembered and recognized of all rock and roll songs. What we remembered especially was that guitar solo. But if you pay attention to the words, they seem to describe Rebecca and her son Jacob. Sermons I can remember, lyrics I always have a little bit of difficulty with. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold. She's buying a stairway to heaven. When she gets there, she knows if the doors are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure, because words can have 2 meanings. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold. She's buying a stairway to heaven. She believes in materialism. She believes she can have it all and possess it all. and everything she needs she can buy. And if she gets to heaven and the gates are closed to her, at least she's got it all already. Too often, we get caught up in amassing the experiences, amassing the possessions, getting to go all the places that we can write on our resumes, that we can put on our college applications to say, I did this or I did that, instead of recognizing what we're doing for others and the ways that it changes us. I grew up as a minister's kid, and it was the 1960s. And in that time on Sunday morning, everybody came to church because there was nothing else to do on Sunday mornings but go to church, but also being the minister's family, that is what you did on Sunday morning. But over time, faith changed from believing in my parents' faith to different experiences. Some that tested, some that were overwhelming in comforts. The birth of our children, falling in love, graduations, healing from illness. At all these times and relationships, these were the thin points, the places where heaven and earth seemed to meet. So often in this life, we believe in two realities, that we live this life here on this planet, and God is up there in the heavens, far out of reach. But in truth, I think that God is the God of the universe, and that here in this life, we can know heaven and we can know hell. Let's live for the heaven in the midst of this life. Not putting off saying, if God gives me all the blessings, then I'll be faithful. But presenting our children for baptism and teaching them all along the ways to love, to be generous, to be compassionate, to be caring, to put others first. And in this way to find heaven in the midst of this life and our stairway to heaven.